Greetings fellow Mist Wanderers, my name is Steve Morgan and this is DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. I've had this video idea for a while, just kind of in the back burner, and had plans to do it eventually, but then I saw quite a few posts about people asking for alternatives to the Mad Mage. I think there was 2 on the Curse of Strahd Facebook group in the space of like a week, so I thought I'd bump it up the queue because it's obviously something that a lot of people are considering. Before I move on, a quick spoiler warning for anyone who wants to play Curse of Strahd or is a current player in Curse of Strahd. This will have a spoiler revealing the identity of the Mad Mage rules as written, and it's someone who's, you know, it's well known in D&D lore, even outside of things like Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. So if you're a current player, please be careful. Even if you are an active player in an active Curse of Strahd game and you already know that person's identity, I'm going to be talking about other NPCs you might not yet have met, so I would be very careful if you consider watching this. Maybe only watch this if you've completed Curse of Strahd, or you're not wanting to play it, or you're thinking of DMing it. Before we talk about the alternatives, let's talk about who the Mad Mage's rules as written. And here I said about spoilers, the Mad Mage rules as written in the story in Curse of Strahd is the wizard Mordenkainen. And I like Mordenkainen as a character, as an NPC, and I like his lore, but some people argue he's a bit of a weird choice. He feels very out of place. He's a bit of just a cameo or a name drop. It's like, hey, we've just got this famous D&D person here in the middle of Barovia, what's going on? And some people as well would argue that he wouldn't lose to Strahd. He is such a more powerful spellcaster and wizard than Strahd is. Although arguably there's the whole thing about how if they fought in Castle Ravenloft, I get the impression from the uprising that he did of the people of the village of Barovia, it was either just outside Castle Ravenloft or on the way to Castle Ravenloft, or they just arrived at Castle Ravenloft when everything kind of went kapooey. You know, maybe Mordenkainen went inside to try and face Strahd, and then Strahd can face through walls, throw any number of minions at him, including lots of vampire spawn. Maybe it was, you know, something like that. He was outnumbered, outmatched, and Strahd had home field advantage. And because people don't like it being Mordenkainen, there are some people who change it. So in this video I'm going to talk about a number of alternatives. I've got a list of about 8. And the first one is probably the easiest, but it probably feels like the most out of place of all these, because it's, instead of saying change it to somebody else, one solution is just to take the Mad Mage out entirely. It's easy enough to do. It's not a major quest line, it's a very minor quest line. I imagine a lot of groups playing Curse of Strahd, unless he's the Fated Ally, and it's actually 2 Fated Ally choices for his card, so, you know, might be the other Fated Ally is chosen, or if you're rigging, stacking the deck, choose a different ally anyway. But he's not a major player in Curse of Strahd, he's just sort of almost like a side quest afterthought type thing. And there aren't even a huge amount of hooks to it, if memory serves. I know that I think the people of Vallaki can talk about him, or maybe it's the Martikovs in the Blue Water Inn. Yeah, I just checked. I think it's just the people of Valakian lore, or whatever it is. So you remove the hooks, and the NPCs don't mention him, and, you know, the players have no reason to know or care about him anyway. I will say there is a downside to removing the Mad Mage entirely, and that is because he is referenced in the Vistana's Tale. The Vistana's Tale is a sort of box text section in Surpool Encampment. So the idea is when the players go to get the card reading from Madame Eva, Vistana tells the story of a wizard who came to Barovia, did an uprising, and Strahd beat him. I love that lore because it's great for bigging up Strahd's power, his scariness. They hear a story of this extremely powerful wizard coming to Barovia and getting defeated by Strahd. Hopefully your players are going to think, wow, Strahd's pretty tough, and not think that he's some sort of weakling pushover. So if you remove the Mad Mage, you might be inclined to think, well, I'll remove the Vistana's Tale, which is a shame. Another thing, as an aside, I like about the Vistana's Tale is it's a tiny clue. It's blink and you miss it, saying about how the wizard and the vampire cast spells at each other. So it hints that Strahd is a spellcaster as well. So the players might not think that Strahd, they just think he may just be a regular vampire who just claws and bites and doesn't cast spells. So I really like that as well. It's a nice little thing. And if the players pick up on that, good on them. But what you could do, I guess, is leave the Vistana's Tale in and tell the story, but just don't give them the hooks. So, because it kind of implies, you know, the body was never found. Is he dead? Isn't he dead? Well, if you then don't drop any hooks, then, you know, the players are probably not going to remember or care anyway. So you could, and you have your cake and eat it too. You've removed the Mad Mage, but you've kept in the Vistana's Tale. You've bigged up Strahd's scariness and his lore, and you don't have to worry about the Mad Mage. Another idea I've seen, and this is what I did in the end, not that the players have already found out, is you could have it be that it is Mordenkainen, but it's not Mordenkainen. It's a simulacrum of Mordenkainen as per the spell. People like this because with the whole arguments about how, real Mordy wouldn't have lost to Strahd. Well, this isn't real Mordy, this is a simulacrum. What I did is, so I had it that Mordenkainen creates a simulacrum of himself, sends the simulacrum to Barovia for two reasons. One, he's busy doing other things and doesn't want to be distracted. And two, he underestimates Strahd. So he thinks, a weakened simulacrum can handle Strahd, no problem. I don't need to go myself. However, when the simulacrum ends up in the domains of Dread in Barovia, the dark powers mess with it. Whether the dark powers or the mists, they turn this simulacrum into a real life person, or at least it has the attributes of a real life person. So my understanding of the simulacrum spell is they only have half the HP of the person they've been cloned from or turned into. And of course they're made from snow, so when they die, they just turn into snow. Nope, this is a real life, bleeding, full HP person now who believes that he is the real Mordenkainen. I had this cool thing planned that if my players, we're doing a post-Curse of Strahd domain hopping Ravenloft campaign at the moment, and they haven't left domains of Dread at all, but if they decided to track down Mordenkainen after the events of Curse of Strahd and left Barovia and left the domains of Dread and tried to seek him out, whether I put him in probably Candlekeep in Sword Coast or his homeworld of Oath, is that how it's pronounced? Orth seems to be the pronunciation I'm finding online. Where was I? Yes, wherever they find him, they actually arrive at this place where they believe Mordenkainen to be, and they actually see him outside, and he's angry and he's frustrated, and he says, there's an imposter here, someone claiming to be Mordenkainen here. I will not stand for this. Come with me. And this version of Mordenkainen, which is this simulacrum who recognises them from Barovia, goes to this other Mordenkainen, and the simulacrum says, how dare you, who are you? And as this happens, the other Mordenkainen just casts a spell, and the Mordenkainen the PCs are with just turns into a pile of snow. And it's at that point the real Mordenkainen says, you must be the Barovian adventurers who helped my simulacrum and defeated Strahd, well done. And that is when they meet the real Mordenkainen and realise that the Mordenkainen they knew wasn't the real Mordenkainen. How many times can I say Mordenkainen in a sentence? Mordenkainen, Mordenkainen, Mordenkainen. I can't remember the source of where I got it from. I got a feeling that it's whether on Facebook or Reddit, just somebody mentioned it. And I'm like, hey, that's cool. But in research for this video, I did find a Reddit post, a guide somebody created, which is quite lengthy actually, talking about it. And it does predate when I started running Curse of Strahd, so it's very possible I borrowed from this guide. I got a feeling that I tweaked some of it beyond that though. So I will include a link to that, and if you are considering Mordenkainen as a simulacrum, you might want to check that out. Another suggestion, Khazan. Khazan is the wizard, sort of advisor to Strahd in the lore, and this is most information for him I think is in the Van Richten's Tower section, because it was originally Khazan's tower, and it talks about how he goes to the Amber Temple, becomes a lich, tries to challenge Strahd. Strahd's like, be my advisor, okay. And then when he tries to become a demi-lich, he accidentally destroys himself. Now, this one's quite a fiddly one. I think it's a good choice because he's someone who's mentioned in the lore already, and it would make a lot of sense. And I've seen multiple people mention this in my research, or just seeing it in passing over the years. But is he a lich and super, super powerful? Or is he, do you change the law that he doesn't become a lich in the end and he's just like an archmage, a wizard, a bit like the stat block that suggested, and never becomes a lich, and then you just have to sort of tweak it from there. I did find a really good post on Reddit when I was researching this video where somebody came up with the idea and discussed their thoughts, and then in the comments people expand on it. I'll share a link in the description to that as well. Next up we have Victor Vallakovich, and I know what you're thinking, hang on a sec, no, Victor Vallakovich is his own person somewhere else. This is a Lunch Break Heroes idea, and for those of you familiar with the Lunch Break Heroes and their great guide and their videos, it's Victor as the Mad Mage, but it's Victor from the future. I think this is really cool. I won't talk too much about the explaining how and why it's him. The Lunch Break Heroes video does a good job of that, and I'll share a link of that in the description. But yeah, I think that's a really cool idea. And then you got, of course, the weird thing of maybe the old Victor from the future meets the young Victor from the present. That could be quite interesting. And there's even some fan art somebody's done. So there was some fan art somebody did of Victor, or it might just been some fan art of somebody that or some art that somebody did that somebody was like, hey, that could work well for Victor. And then somebody adapted that art, which has kind of been claimed as good art for Victor, and made him older looking, grey hair, beard, wrinklier, and they'd put it on Reddit. So I'll share a link to that as well. Next up, this would be the one I'd probably choose if I were to run Curse of Strahd again. Firan Zal'honan. Firan Zal'honan is detailed in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft in the Mist Wanderers section. And he is, spoilers alert again for anyone who's concerned about this, he is sort of the human side of Azalin Rex, the infamous Lich, the Dark Lord of Darkon from older lore. In current 5th edition lore, it's complicated. He's disappeared. Where's he gone? Who knows? And there's other people trying to be the new Dark Lord. But if you have read the novel Strahd, The War Against Azalin, which is the sequel to the original Strahd, obviously, he and Strahd have a rivalry, and it is great. You've got the vampire Strahd, the Lich Azalin. They hate each other's guts, but they need each other's help to try and figure out the nature of Barovia, the mists, the dark powers, etc. Then in one of the old Ravenloft novels, there's a wizard called Firan fighting a Lich called Darkulus, and they realise, or at least Firan realises, that they are the two parts of Azalin. Azalin was split. Firan is like the human side of Azalin, and Darkulus is the Lich side of Azalin, and therefore they collectively make up Azalin. And maybe when they fight and defeat each other, that's when Azalin reappears. I'm kind of going to do something like that in the sort of end game of my current campaign. Now, Firan is a human, and in Van Richten's Guide is suggested as an Archmage stat block, so he's a good fit for replacing Mordenkainen and being in the replacement Mad Mage. I would consider checking him out and researching him, and I actually did a video talking more about him and what stat block, well, I think I said it's the same stat block, but what changes to make to the stat block, what spells he would have, what magic items he would have, etc. Bit of role play info and things like that. If you are considering it, please check it out. Next up, we have a PC backstory NPC. I think this has been suggested a few times, and I think it would work as a really good idea. For example, let's say one of your players, when they're coming up with a character idea, says, oh, I had a mentor who went missing. Great. If they're a wizard PC and their mentor was a powerful wizard, perfect. That could be the person who ends up being the Mad Mage and the replacement for Mordenkainen. Next up is a weird suggestion, mostly because it's not a spellcaster, but I have seen it suggested a few times. And I love this NPC. It's probably one of my favourite Ravenloft NPCs, Jander Sunstar. Jander Sunstar is a good, technically sort of, not quite, vampire, who's the protagonist of Vampire of the Mists, one of the Ravenloft novels that includes Strahd and Barovia, where Jander, a vampire from the Sword Coast, gets sucked into Barovia and then becomes frenemies with Strahd. Frenemies the right word, maybe? But yeah, he's a great character, and I've introduced him in my post-Curse of Strahd game and treated it that the events of Vampire the Mist were true, so when he meets the players and tells them his backstory about how he was in Barovia centuries earlier, and then he hears that the PCs have defeated Strahd, he's like, you know, nice one, you did what I couldn't accomplish. But adding him into Curse of Strahd is tricky because he is also a vampire, and he's already one vampire. Starting to think of the Spark song, this Domain of Dread isn't big enough for the both of us. And yeah, I would love to include him in Curse of Strahd and Barovia, and I bet there's DMs who have, and I do know of some. There's one person who sends me updates and, you know, lets me know about how they've included Jander, and it's really cool. But yeah, I'm just urging caution, I guess. You don't want someone to be as strong or stronger than Strahd. If you do include Jander, have him be weaker than Strahd, I think. And also, the bigger issue is he's not a spellcaster. So you could change the Mad Mage to something like the Mad Warrior or the Mad something. Maybe not the Mad Vampire, because then you don't want to have, like, you know, at that point... Oh no, I think the PCs probably would know that Strahd is a vampire from the lore of just Barovians in general. But then, you know, might be complicated again. If you do that, of course, rewrite the Vistana's tale accordingly, and instead of saying this powerful wizard came to the land to fight Strahd, this powerful warrior or powerful vampire or whatever did it. And again, I have a dedicated video all about Jander, because I love Jander, and I talk about how I kind of ran him and role-played him and stat block I used and, you know, things I did and stuff like that. And lastly, you know, you could use Mordenkainen, who is a famous wizard from D&D. He's not the only famous wizard from D&D. I'm currently reading the Dragonlance novels, the original trilogy. I'm in the middle of the second one, and I've fallen in love with Raistlin Majere, assuming that's how it's pronounced, who is the wizard in the sort of group of adventures in the Dragonlance novels. And I actually, when I was looking at those two recent Facebook posts where somebody was asking for Omitting the Mad Mage, someone suggested Raistlin, and I was like, yay! And yeah, I think that could be a cool thing as well. So that's kind of my wildcard choice, my kind of, you don't want Mordenkainen, so here's this person who's almost exactly like Mordenkainen in terms of scale of like D&D fame. Don't have Mordenkainen, have Raistlin instead. Kind of just feels like a very minor sidestep and probably doesn't, go away from the issue. But, I love Raistlin. I think he's a cool character. I wanted to suggest him as the last one, but probably out of all of the ones I've suggested, probably the last choice I do. But then also I love him, so maybe I would choose him. And those are all the choices. Let me know if there's somebody you would use instead. Let me know if you used one of the ones I suggested. How did it go? Leave comments letting me know how you ran it, or if you stuck with Mordenkainen but ran him differently, or ran him rules as written and your players loved him. I'd love to know your stories. Last thing I want to talk about is how to run the Mad Mage. I did it differently to what's in the book. I won't repeat it here because I did talk about it in another video. It was my Curse of Strahd homebrew, my favourite homebrew tweaks and changes to Curse of Strahd. It's one of my most popular videos from over a year ago now, I think, where I talk about, I found a Reddit post that's not on the Curse of Strahd subreddit, it's on one of the regular, main D&D ones. Somebody said how they changed the Mad Mage encounter. I mostly followed that, made a few changes on my own, and I think it's a good way to do it, especially if people don't have greater restoration, which seems to be a big problem with restoring the Mad Mage's sanity. So that's it for this one. I have a busy August coming up, so I might not be able to hit a video a week. I'm going to try to aim for at least a video a fortnight, so apologies if my productivity is slowed a bit. Next Curse of Strahd video, I was going to do a video that's kind of a fourth video in my series of Controversial 3 videos, so it'll have to be renamed my Controversial 4, and I'll have to break the whole thing with a name. I talk about stuff that, hopefully people understand where I'm coming from, but I understand it probably goes against the grain of what a lot of Curse of Strahd DMs would advise or do. I don't know. And then I've got an idea for my next Ravenloft video is going to be the new monsters introduced in the 2024 monster manual that you can add to a Ravenloft campaign. I was considering doing a version where it talks about new monsters you can add to Curse of Strahd, such as there's a vampire familiar person now, which would be great. But this is complicated because it's a 2014 campaign, it's obviously Curse of Strahd came out way before those rules were written, and obviously you can adapt it, but it might be complicated to adapt it, and it might be complicated you running a 2014 game with some 2024 monsters, I don't know. But I think on the Ravenloft front, it could work well, and there's probably more flexibility, and if you're like me running a higher level game, if the 2024 monsters, I understand, have slightly higher AC, and maybe a bit more HP, that's less of an issue because my players at the moment are just hacking and slashing through everything anyway because, they're like level 16. So that'll be my next Ravenloft video, but we'll see. I say these things and then change my schedule around anyway. That's it for this one. We'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Wanderers.